we really wanted to get a topic talking about career trajectories because there's not a single path. There's not a linear path. People come at this from lots of different directions. Evan, take it away.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jeff. And thanks so much, Dana, for this opportunity. Just thrilled to be here today and to get to work on this with Nick and Kalina. The prep for this is probably half the fun, and today hopefully is the other half of the fun. But this is a topic that's near and dear to our hearts, and I'm sure everyone on this call feels the same way. So what we thought would be a nice way to dig into this is to basically talk a little bit about our own careers. We're each going to spend a couple minutes doing that to very much illustrate that although between myself, Nick, and Kaleena, we're doing similar work today, similar roles, got here in very different ways, and we thought they'd be illustrative since everyone will have that very varied path. So just to start things off, I came into this in a different way than some, maybe than most. I was in strategy consulting, and then in more of a boutique niche consulting around customer centricity consulting with a company called Peppers and Rogers. And it was at that point that I got really interested in the customer and really interested in how to work with them and organize companies around their needs. And I also realized I didn't want to be a consultant anymore. I would rather be inside an organization and be much more focused on seeing a project through from the beginning to the end, and that was challenging to do as a consultant. So I wanted to come into tech, into a startup, and I had an opportunity to join a company called Rapid7 in 2012. Right at the time, they were just starting to grow really quickly, and I was brought on board what was essentially a role around customer engagement programs, thinking of like beta programs, customer forums, user groups, the like. And the role itself was within the customer success organization. Though I wasn't the CSM, it was part of the customer success organization, which for me was an awesome entryway to the organization, to understanding customers. And I was with that team for about half a year. Then there was a reorg, and then I was aligned to the marketing team. So that was sort of a bit of luck that happened. It wasn't really that I chose it. It wasn't that I did something to make that happen. It just sort of naturally happened, and it was just great luck. So it allowed me to get connected to the marketing team, where I stayed for the duration of my time there, which was almost 6 years, reporting in through different parts of the marketing org, whether it was the corporate comms team, whether it was product marketing, or whether it was demand. And I had reported in at varying times to each of those. Spent 6 years at Rapid7, and I was thrilled with every moment of it. Got to see the company grow and picked up so much learning along the way. Customer advocacy, customer marketing, customer references. Had the chance to spread my wings to join a much larger team and a larger organization after that at Akamai here in Cambridge, where I spent 2 years there, really getting exposed to some of the biggest, most large companies out there, Fortune 100 companies, and building programs at a global scale, because we had such a big presence globally. And then most recently joined a company back to my startup roots called Catchpoint here, based both in New York and Boston, where I've been since March. When the opportunity came to get back to my startup roots, I couldn't miss out on that opportunity. I've just been thrilled with such a fast growth company, such an amazing team. And that's a little bit of how I got here. So a little bit different than some others. But I just wanted to start out that way, and then maybe gonna pass it off to Kaleena to talk a little bit about how she got to where she is today.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. Hi, everyone. I'm Kaleena Bryant. A little bit about my journey. It's been interesting. I actually started off in tech, in sales, actually. I joined Marketo back in, I think it was 2015. And at that time, Marketo was super booming company. They had just had a successful IPO. And I was really thrown into sales development. Really loved that opportunity. I started thinking about how can I have a full 360 relationship with our customers. One thing that I loved about sales was generating the pipeline, but also developing the relationship and long-term getting it across the finish line. But one thing that I was always, I guess, disappointed about was once you close the deal, you pass them off to someone else to fully onboard them. And then that relationship is gone. You're working on the next, potential customer. And so as I was thinking about my career, there was a few things. Number one, experiencing Marketo already being a public company, I started to look around and see people that experienced Marketo when they were, a private company, and then also looking at the amount of customers. So there was two things. One, I wanted to experience a startup and actually being a part of that journey in a full circle of experiencing an IPO. And then two, I wanted to treat our customers like human beings, not just dollar signs. And after a while, when you have a quota, you have to focus. Every month you have a new quota that you have to bring in, and that allows you to, not give as much time as a potential customer as you'd like. So as I was sketching out, what else do you want? I started saying, I want customer centricity. I want to, actually understand our customers, understand their needs, their pains. And I also want to be a little bit creative too. And then I also want to experience, an IPO. So I started looking around at different jobs. And at that time, customer marketing wasn't a big buzz. You had a reference manager, you had, customer success manager or customer account manager at that time. But I was actually looking to get away from the sales org. So I just started putting in advocacy roles and customer relationship roles in search. And at that time, I found a customer marketing lead role at Anaplan. And at that time, Anaplan was a private company, very creative. They were at a point where, they were looking for something new. There wasn't a full, I guess, book for me to follow, which I thought was really cool. I can make it my own. So I, left sales, and I actually received a lot of feedback saying, Kaleena, how can you leave the hottest company at the time? We're Marketo, and number two, how can you leave sales? This is the best career ever. You're going to make a lot of money. But, money was great, but I also wanted to love my job. I wanted to be passionate about what I did every single day. And so I went to Anaplan. And then I jumped ship, actually, and thinking about tech, a lot of people tell you you're not supposed to jump ship. I disagree with that. I think that you should learn, what gives you passion. You should learn, what are you actually good at, and you should also always look for opportunity because you're going to constantly grow. And so I took on that role. And at that time, it was all about creating newsletters, engagements, webinars. To be honest, I was doing a demand gen role, a communications role, all in the hat of customer marketing. And then I started realizing engagement was great. We were doing these cool user conferences, bringing in customers. I was able to, develop relationships with vice presidents of companies, C-level executives. I thought it was great. But then I also realized I wasn't tracking the health of a customer. So I could experience, being in a good relationship with a customer, but not realizing that their account may have been churning, even though they were doing a speaking engagement. So I really wanted to dive in and look at the operations of what was going on with the health of our customer. And so that led me into customer operations. And one cool thing about Anaplan, they were open to me bouncing around. As long as I was focused on our customer development, I went from marketing, one day back to customer operations and to customer success, which is, I think, why my career at Anaplan was so long, because I had never had an opportunity to get bored. It was always finding something else or looking for another problem to solve. So then dove into customer operations, loved, figuring out the health of our customers, figuring out the CSAT, the NPS. But then, I missed the opportunity of the sexy stuff. I didn't have the opportunity to put them into the speaking engagements anymore and have those one-to-ones. So then I moved into the community department. And building out that from bottoms up. And that was a combination of creating user groups. And in my head, I really wanted to travel. So I was like, okay, if I create a user group in Singapore, hell, I get to go, Singapore. If I create a user group in Moscow, I get to go to Moscow. So all of a sudden overnight, I had all these stamps on my passport because I was developing customer relationships by developing user groups. And then fast forward, I really started connecting all the dots with sales, marketing, customer operations, community, and realized every component was extremely important. So I was trying to figure out, okay, how do we get to that executive suite? So I started, moving into different directions. And then at that time, getting other opportunities to explore roles. And then I started getting into more leadership opportunities. So I joined a company by the name of TalkDesk, and they were looking for executive relationships, building customer marketing from scratch. And then I really started diving into building out customer advisory boards, and really building out how to get buy-in from the top up. And so that was a really great experience, when it came to building things from scratch and trusting yourself, trusting your gut. And I would say, with Anaplan, I was able to test the waters, and really look at what does executive relationships mean, and then carry that on to additional companies. And then fast forward, I really started thinking about, well, does my role need to sit in marketing? Does it need to sit in customer success? Or does it need to sit in sales? And I think long story short is as long as you're good at your job and you're driving results, you can sit anywhere. I think that's the key point, but making sure that you have the tools that you need. And so dove into different other companies, and then, recently lining up at Asana. And the cool thing about Asana is they wanted advocacy. They wanted me to focus strictly on executive relationships and actually figuring out how to get our executives to really become our partners, not just be a dollar sign, but actually understand, like, what does Asana need to give our customers for them to be successful long term. And I thought that was, the true meaning of customer centricity. And when you think about it, sometimes in customer marketing, you can get thrown into references, customer events, field marketing, you name it. But you kind of lose the sense of that customer centricity, making sure that the customer is number one. And so at Asana, it's really creative. I get to work with so many different people that are eager to learn, eager to figure out, hey, what does it take to make our customers successful? So right now it's a good ride. I'm loving it. I get to build things from scratch. I get to work with some pretty amazing people that are extremely smart, and they challenge me. So I would say the road that I took, you don't have to take it. I would say that I love everything that I do, but I took a lot of risk. There was moments where I was like, hey, I gotta go. I'm going to this job now, or hey, I don't like this. I'm gonna switch to this department. But I would say every no that I receive, or every time someone said, I don't think you should do that, those are the people that are now calling me saying, hey, can I have a coffee with you? And, can you look at my resume? So I would say for all of those out there that's just trying to do something, follow what you like, and follow the passion, and keep the customer number one. That's the best thing, in our role is if the customer is successful and happy, your role, your career will always be there. And I'll conclude with that and pass it over to Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Kalina. So I'm in good company here. I love this. So I appreciate that, both Evan and Kalina, everybody's story. So mine's a little bit different as well. I really learned, I think, the most about customer centricity as an independent entrepreneurial musician, kind of before I really hit the corporate world. And so I had done that for a number of years, and I went to school for graphic design and took a lot of copywriting, English writing courses and things like that as well to make myself marketable. And so was in a bit of a gig economy before I started bouncing around into more of the corporate and SMB kind of world. And what I realized was how to cultivate fans into a community, and then into being able to monetize those relationships, and not in a slimy kind of way, I guess, in terms of like that's the only goal, but more so because there was a mutual value, a mutual partnership that each party, the fans or customers and the organization, wanted to value each other, wanted to help each other succeed. And so that was kind of that early genesis of the customer marketer for me, not even knowing at the time that that's really what that was or is. And so I got into the field of higher education and recruitment marketing, and which is almost like a sales kind of a role, essentially, and bounced around to different marketing stuff. And at that time, social media marketing was coming out, inbound marketing. I jumped all over that stuff. And then eventually, fast forward a little bit, I landed into the human capital management software industry. And I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, so I'm still here today. But it was there with a company that is now Insperity, but their technology division in Madison, Wisconsin, and it was a great fit at the time. I got to really learn about SaaS software and doing all sorts of marketing stuff, inbound marketing related things, social media marketing. I got to do a little bit of everything, and I had an organization with some mentors that saw my ambition toward these various new technologies and things like that, and really allowed me to just kind of move in that direction into helping with publicity and all these kinds of things, a lot of comms kind of related marketing avenues, and that led to the eventual hiring of me here at Ceridian, which has been a phenomenal ride for me. 2016, I landed with Ceridian specifically to come in and help with their advocacy program and their Dayforce customer program. Dayforce is our HCM product, but it's been a lot of fun. And so I came in to help grow that community. And kind of, I think, like you, Evan, in the sense, and Kaleena too, bouncing around different departments. I started out in customer success, doing advocacy in that realm, and now I live in the marketing department, still doing advocacy that affects and helps customer success and sales and product and support and all those areas. So it's just. All I can say is overall, as you listen to all three of us, it's just not a linear path. But I think what you'll start to see between the three of us, and as we talk throughout this presentation, is there are some common themes and some common things and trends that are coming together throughout each of our experiences, and those are starting to narrow. And then the market is also directing how our careers move forward, in the sense that customers are really in charge, and if you want to advance in the marketplace, you need to partner with them, and you need to create value for them that is mutual, and really build a relationship so you can mutually succeed. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that was fantastic, and I think hopefully that was that. I think it's just so different, and I'm glad to see sort of those three different paths. So one thing I wanted to talk about coming up is around sort of just the customer marketing as a discipline. It was for those who've been in it for a while. Jeff said he was in it yesterday, before it was a thing, and a bunch of us have felt that way as well. But it was always a space that was sort of about to arrive. It was never quite arrived yet. It was sort of, wait another year, we made another year, wait another year. When is it going to be the moment? You've had demand in the sun, you had marketing ops, you had product marketing, you had all the other marketing elements sort of getting a lot of love and getting a lot of attention. And a bunch of us sort of looking jealously, wow, they're getting a lot of attention. When is customer marketing, customer advocacy, when is it going to be our day in the sun? When are we going to have a framework? When are we going to have the seat at the table? When is this really going to be really having the budget and the right resourcing that it deserves, and that the other parts of marketing have gotten? And I think, well, just by virtue of that we're having this CustomerX Con here today, it's clearly arrived. I think the moment has arrived, and I wanted to sort of have Kalina talk a little bit of sort of progression of customer marketing as a parable during one of our prep sessions. She came up with a great analogy, so I wanted her to maybe just spend a minute talking through that here.
Yeah, it's funny actually how me, Evan, and Nick came up with this. I was going on this long rant and used an example of the Warriors. They're not that good anymore, but between like the years of 2016, 2017, they were just on this winning streak. And I'm originally an Oakland native, and I remember the days where, Warrior tickets were basically free. Because they were that bad. And then all of a sudden, they became this superstar overnight. They had this dream team, and everybody wanted to rep their swag and, come to these games and, go to the Coliseum, people coming from all over the Bay Area. And it was just like a winning streak. And so I use that example similar to customer marketing, because me coming from sales and going into customer marketing, I received a lot of, you're going to regret this, Kaleena. This is not going to be here in a few years. Customer marketing is not, the hot thing. People thought customer marketing was just generating case studies. And to be honest with you, I always have someone on my team that is specifically for case studies. I focus on the bigger, like the long strategy. Case studies are extremely important, but that's only one segment of customer marketing. But, a few years ago, that's what people thought, customer marketing was, just keep pushing out these case studies. But people didn't realize, if you think about it, customer marketing holds on, they're the heart of everything that we do in a company. And the reason why I say that is, if you're going to do a big user conference, you need a list of customers that are willing to speak. Well, how are you going to get those customers? You're going to go ping customer marketing, and you're going to give them usually a very short deadline for them to, spike up like 10 or 15 or 20 customers that are not just great candidates, but they have to have a certain job title. They have to have a certain, company logo. And behind the scenes, the customer marketing person is putting their head down, and first, somehow we get it done. And somehow in the very end, we get a thank you, but we usually get the thank you from the customer that we treated so right along the journey. The person that we nurture, we help them with their slides, we help them with their hotel room, we help them, all the way from, are you a vegetarian, or do you want, steak versus salmon because of their diet. So that's the customer marketing person behind the scenes. And then long term, that customer feels so great that all of a sudden you'll get another ping and someone saying, hey, I'm almost done. I'm close to closing this deal, but I need 2 references, in 24 hours. Can you make it happen? And it's like, okay. And on the sell side, you generate these references because of the relationships that you've developed, by treating your customer so right. You generate those references. What happens? The deal closes. Customer marketing does not get a chip of that deal. They barely get a thank you, but the customer, what happens? The customer pinged you and they say, well, did that deal close? They have the relationship with you. But the salesperson, they're on to the next thing. They ping you, a month later saying, hey, I have this deal and I need this customer. And then fast forward, you also have speaking engagements that are more of happy hours, meet and greets. You have executive dinners, but that all requires a customer. And then I would say you also have demand gen, and demand gen does wonderful campaigns, but without the campaign, without the customer, what kind of campaign do you have? When you look at your website and your design team, they're looking to build a beautiful website. What happens? They need logos. And so I say all of this to say that, customer marketing is the heart of making sure everything works. All the way from executive dinners, all the way from closing deals, all the way from a beautiful website, a campaign, a user conference, user group, you name it. And I say this and bring it back to the Warriors because, at first we were the people that were just supposed to generate content. We were just supposed to push out a newsletter once a month. We were just supposed to create a new case study to send over to the sell side. And now we're the heart of, hey, we can't actually close this deal without this meet and greet. And we're the person that, hey, without this logo or without this relationship, we can't actually move forward as a company. So I would say that right now we're in the segment of, that winning streak of all the championships coming our way. And I think that we should actually enjoy this moment and also speak up for ourselves. I think that this is the prime time of, not taking no for an answer and realizing your strength and what you actually bring to the table, because without you, your relationships, every time you leave a company or go somewhere else, your relationships follow. So all your customer relationships that you're on text message basis with, they go with you. And I think that the organization that you're at, all the departments need to start to see that and show respect, because deals won't close without a customer reference. I've seen plenty of times where you're going head to head with your competitor, and that competitor is just able to generate a faster reference or a better reference, and that's the deal. It wasn't that the product wasn't great or your product wasn't great, it's the fact that they were able to get a customer to say exactly why they will not leave you or leave that product. So this is the time, right now, enjoy being the warrior, enjoy this experience, because it's going to constantly change. But I think that the beautiful thing about customer marketing is we're so tied in with the customer, and we treat them like human beings. And most companies right now are going into this customer centric layout, that we've been doing this for years. We understand how to treat a customer. We understand what they are looking for. So now we're the teachers.
I think that's a great point, Kalina. And I was going to say that for me, it's very much about bringing additional things under that umbrella, defining more things and pulling more things in that might have been on the periphery, or things that could be a shared goal with customer success or with another team, but might be orchestrated by the customer marketing team. So I think it was moving from what was that traditional definition to just broadening that definition. And I think just being very, very true to what Jeff mentioned yesterday in terms of knowing what your executives care about, and making sure that we continue to have that moment in the sun as a customer marketing team, to make sure that we're always staying true to, yes, the things that were part of that traditional definition, but always make sure that you have your ear out and to the ground to make sure that you're aware of what your executives are most focused on. So I wanted to move on, and I think when we think of skill sets for a customer marketer, I think we're very aware of some of the basics, whether it's good with tech, or whether it's relationships that Kaleena was talking about. But I think there's a couple of others that during our prep sessions that we were talking about this, that were sort of unsung heroes, or sort of things you might not initially think about would be really helpful for a customer marketer. So one of the things that we had talked about was, well, it's not here on the slide, but I came from a background in consulting, and when you're in consulting, you're not the boss of any of the people you're working with, not even your own team, not your customer's team. And I found that as a customer marketer, a lot of times you have to influence and get teams to collaborate and spend time with you, even though they don't report to you, you don't have the same boss, you might not on paper have the same goals. But I think it's very much around making sure that what you're doing as a customer marketing ties back to other folks' goals, so that way they're not feeling it's a favor to you. So I think so you're going to get their collaboration. So I think one thing is really being able to lead and influence without having that direct chain of command. And I think that's going to be important, because these roles are so cross-functional, because of all the teams that Nick and Kaleena and myself were just referencing that we work with. I think that's going to be an important skill set to have, even though you might not see it in a job description, or you might see it. I'm starting to see it now, but I think that's something that is great to have in your back pocket, since it's going to be needed. And Kaleena, I know we talked about in some of our prep calls. Can you talk a little bit why a psychology background might be helpful here? Why is that key here?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And I think, Evan, you might have just spot on about it. Being able to, I would say, show value, but also show, how you're beneficial to every department. And in order to do that, my undergrad is in psychology, cognitive and social to be exact. And I really focus on not just what I want, but when I'm working with other departments and people, especially from a C-level executive, if you look at the CMO, if you look at the, SVP of customer success, or whatever it might be, even the CEO, you have to understand what they want in order to do your job really well. And I would say that making sure that you can align with the company goals is extremely important, but you have to actually take a step back and understand, from a social perspective, how do you actually get there? Who are going to be your advocates, and I think, advocates in a sense of who's going to push the needle for you. Because let's say you want to do a really big user conference. In order to do that, you have to have buy-in from your executive. And they have to help push it for you. And also there's a question that came in from Tiffany that says she heads up, customer advocacy, and she sits in marketing, but also there's a customer loyalty team in CS. That's psychology all by itself. You guys have two similar goals. There's two departments with the same goal basically, but two different departments. And you have to be able to take a step back and say, well, what do we actually want to accomplish? Okay, we want to accomplish the same thing, but I'm going to, go in it from this segment and you're going at it from this segment. You have to be able to take a step back and I guess communicate eye to eye with that individual, because you have to work with them. They're not going to, at times, maybe they'll merge the departments, but it's not going to be tomorrow, and so what do you actually do for the moment? You figure out what that person needs and what their, quarterly metrics are. Like at the end of the quarter, what's their goals? Okay, well, how can you help them, and what's your goals and how can they help you? And I think that that's the importance of psychology, of, figuring out how can you work together with someone. And I think that's going to go a long way, because with customer marketing, unfortunately, our roles will continue to bounce in different organizations. And I think that you have to look at, again, the executive relationship. You know, who's going to be your advocate long term? Is it going to be the CMO? Is it going to be the CCO? Is it going to be the CEO? Whoever it might be, you know, that's who you need to work with, because they're going to push for the things that you want. But two, what other departments do you have to work with? You know, and actually, you know, start writing your list out and writing out what can you guys accomplish together. And I guess my prime example on that is, you know, I'm in advocacy under customer success, but I also work very closely with customer marketing and our community department. And we all have very similar goals, but we're going to accomplish them in different ways. But I can't, you know, not work with community and not work with customer marketing. I won't be successful. So I take the tools that I have with the executive relationships and say, hey, this is what I can give you. But in return, you know, they have tools on the community side and they have tools from the customer marketing side that I need. So I consider us all as partners. And that goes all the way back from the psychology of, hey, it's not about what you want sometimes. What does someone else want?
So true, so true. So, and Nick, can you talk a little bit about, you talked about some copywriting and comms in your background. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that fits in general, because my philosophy is that everything boils down to communication and relationships. So you kind of need a way to communicate, express yourself, and have your intent understood, and be able to listen and have that reciprocal back and forth with another party to get to a level of trust where you can build a relationship. And that's exactly what is happening when you're working in customer marketing with your internal customers, meaning the other departments that you might be interacting with and serving from a voice of customer kind of standpoint to help them and your whole organization reach its goals together. But also, and certainly your direct customers who are buying your product and who you're trying to build a relationship with to make them as successful as possible, as quickly as possible, so they can, you know, realize value from their decision to purchase from you. And then beyond that, you want to go even beyond that. And when you build a partnership with your customers, that's when you're able to do that. And a lot of that happens in various communications back and forth. And that's why I think copywriting, comms in general, is just really important. And I also think psychology is extremely important, and just EQ and being able to pivot between your audiences. And we'll talk a little bit, I know, about that. But it's crucial, because you have to have the right kind of empathy and understand who your audience is, whether it's internal or external, to be able to express what you need to express, to build the trust you need to build, to then you know, accomplish the goals that you're looking to accomplish. And hopefully, if you're doing it well, it's a win-win. So you're helping your customers accomplish their goals and those kinds of things. And that's why I typically tell folks who get into customer marketing and advocacy and things like that, you really want to talk with your customers and lead with what's in it for them first, you know, before you start asking for anything in return. And usually what's in it for them benefits you by association. So and how do you achieve that? You have to communicate well. You have to be able to position things well. Psychology, copywriting, it all comes into play. So that's my 2 cents on that.
That's awesome, and I think that tees us up well for sort of the next place we're going in our discussion here, which is very much around recipe for success in a role. So we talked about some of those necessary skill sets you might bring to the table, or these subtly helpful skill sets that you might bring to the table. But some of this is out of your control. So when we think about, when you see a job description for a role, right? Like, does it have the right components? And do you bring sort of the skill sets that go along with that role? And that's one thing that I wanted to talk about as we think about looking at a job description. And I've seen this over time, and I still sometimes see this happen when you look at a job description, or someone will share something with you. What do you think about this? And you start looking and you start reading and you say, this is good. This is good. Okay, they want that, and they also want references, and they want storytelling, and they want cabs, and they want executive advisory, and they want all of this. And you read the role and you're like, that's a great job for like 3 people. right? So, and I think all of us have probably been either read a role like that or maybe even been in a role like that. But I would say definitely understanding the scope of a role. But I think also something that when Kaleena and Nick and I were talking earlier is that you also have the ability to come back and if you're interviewing for a role that you see that's like that you think you could love, but there's just probably too much in there. I think, I mean, everyone has to do what's right for their own career, but I think there's also the opportunity to potentially have a conversation of saying, you know, I have a background in this. I understand what it takes to be successful at each of these components, but that won't be able to be one person. You know, it could be a discussion of, well, maybe we need to carve out this other piece or get to that later, or maybe figure out how to get that supported by another team member or additional resources. But it's, and that's not coming from a negative place. I think it's coming from some people write a job description. Maybe they've never had that role at an org before, and they might have just cobbled together a couple of job descriptions they saw posted and sort of put them into one. And I think that's great. It's sort of exciting. It is expanding the tent, but we also want to be realistic, I would say, about how much one single person could take on and how much you can do with quality, right? Because no one's going to thank you if you do like a B or a B minus at 6 or 3 or 4 different jobs within one. So I think it's definitely something that I've seen. And I think we talked about this in our prep call. I think others have seen it as well. And I think it's also talking about the level of the role. I'm sometimes seeing a job as a specialist that could easily be a manager, a senior manager. So I think you also need to be properly positioned, the role itself within the organization, for it to have the resources that it needs. So I think it's sort of how much is in the role itself, as well as how the role is scoped relative to level within the organization. So I would say those are things that will continue to happen, and I think it's just important to keep an eye out. Yeah, so that was just an initial thought that I had, and I wanted to see if we could have Nick maybe talk a little bit. You talked about relationship capital. I know you touched on that lightly a minute ago. I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think just understanding, this goes back to what I said before, understanding your audiences, both internal and external. You really need to, as a customer marketer, you just touch so many different parts of the organization and different parts of your customer populations that you really are tasked with having to pivot between various needs of each of these customer segments, if you will, internal or external customer segments. And so it's really important to understand how what you do in your function can benefit those folks. And I guess what I mean by that is, for example, like support. So this is a common community advocacy, customer marketing kind of a theme. Well, if you have a community or you have customers peer-to-peer being able to chat with each other, they can lighten the burden for support sometimes, because maybe they're getting answers from their fellow customers versus having to enter those as a support ticket, and by their peers answering those questions, you know, maybe they're forming other relationships, and that's all fostering that community even further. And that's great, because then now that's helping the support team or product. You know, you've got customer advisory boards, you've got user groups and whatever, and you're gathering feedback from customers that is going to help the product team to build that product to the demands of what your market is asking for. So now you have more of a market, really, or you can at least retain those customers who are saying they need these things. And I always like to position that with our customers. That kind of thing is, this is your product. You get to own this. This is your opportunity to own the product by providing feedback and having us build it out the way you need it to work. So you want it, you want it to work, or you want to continue to use it in the way that your organization is evolving. So that's kind of what I think about with relationship capital is understanding who needs what and what's important to them, and understanding how, as a customer marketer, you're coordinating a win-win for your internal audiences and your external audience, your customers.
That's awesome, Nick. Thank you for that. And so moving to the next one, this is one that's close to my heart, but I'm actually going to maybe have Kalina talk a little bit about it at the beginning, customer fluency, because I think that's one that is subtle, but a huge differentiator in a role if you're able to master that. So Kalina, maybe do you want to tee up a little bit about customer fluency?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And I guess before I go into that, I see some questions in the chat, and they actually chimed in on your thoughts, Evan, in regards to when you have one job that's actually for three. When you're thinking about that, I think that you should really have a great conversation with a hiring manager, because everything's up for negotiation. A lot of the times, and Evan pointed this out, people are just copying and pasting these roles, and a lot of the times they have a specialist role, but they say you should have 10 years of experience. Customer marketing it wasn't even labeled that 10 years ago. So I think, it's all up for negotiation. And I would say, really think about, and this is something I do before I go after any new role, I scope out exactly what I love and what I want to focus on. And then I have another column that states, what am I okay with dealing with? I don't, let's say writing, for example, I don't love it, but I can do it, and I'm okay with it, just not having that as, 100% of my job. But what I do love is the customer fluency. So I would say, talk to your hiring manager and really get a feel as to what they actually want for the role and what you think the role needs. And when you finish up all your interviews at the end, when they're ready to make you that offer, they're more than happy to give you what you're looking for. Maybe that's a title change. Maybe that's coming in with already 2 headcounts guaranteed, or maybe the scope has gotten a little bit smaller because they don't have headcount for those 2, but they understand that maybe your first 6 months, you're only going to focus on that, and then potentially get headcount and then focus on the bigger scope. So just closing that loop there. And then in regards to customer fluency, this is an interesting one. I think that when you're getting into customer marketing, you do have to love engagement, and you do have to understand. And I think me and Evan and Nick, we talked about this, being an introvert versus an extrovert. And this is so important because, interesting enough, I'm actually an introvert. But when I go into work, I'm a big extrovert, because I love to get the customers engaged. And when you're looking at customer fluency, you got to understand what they're looking for, and taking a step back and figuring out how to make them successful. And I think that when you actually can understand that, you can, paint your scope, and actually figure out how to get them to where they need to be, but also how to hit the company goals, and how to break that down from a quarterly perspective, and also how to break it down into revenue. If you're looking at, let's say, your strategic accounts, and looking at how much influence you have with each one of those accounts, that also ties into your renewals. And if, let's say, 3 of your strategic accounts is up for a certain renewal, you need to be able to build a certain relationship to get that executive buyer and invested and engaged, and to generate that customer fluency, and to generate those opportunities. And long term, I think that will help, because after every quarter, when people are realizing that they're hitting their numbers, they're hitting their expansion goals, they can tie it into all of your customer marketing engagements and initiatives. So I think that, that's my thought process of customer fluency. But, Evan, chime in if you want to go a little bit deeper on that.
Yeah, so when I think also customer fluency, I think it's, you want to become, either you are or you become that person who if your exec or your C-level person sort of sees you in the hall, you want to be like, wait, stop, Kalina, wait, Nick, stop, wait, tell me about that customer. Or, I just had an analyst talk to me, he wants to talk to whoever. You want that sort of instant recognition that they don't have to go to sales, they don't even necessarily have to go to customer success. They might come to you as a customer marketer because you've vetted, you've sort of tried people out, who's going to have your back, not because they spend the most necessarily, not because they have a huge title necessarily, but because they might just be that right person for that right opportunity. So I think it's really being able to, at a moment's notice, have the right fit for the opportunity that emerges. And I think that will just come through exposure. I know when we were talking to, in our prep calls for this, Kaleena says she's on lots of calls, Nick's on lots of calls. When I was at Rapid7, I'd probably been on more than 400 or 500 discovery calls with our customers when we had product management on there. And that just helped me get ingrained to sort of hear how they talk, hear their challenges, hear their pain points, and hear where we brought them success. And just sort of was an automatic, you need this, boom, this person's a great fit. If not that, then this person. So it's just really having that at the tip of your tongue and you want to be that go-to person. And it won't happen on day one, right? If we're in new jobs, I know I am and a few of us are, but get yourself toward there. That would be a recommendation we have. And then I'm going to sort of tie in sort of executive buy-in and knowing what's a priority and starting there. So executive buy-in, I would say, is important in any part of marketing, right? You have to show your value, and your program has to be there for a reason, but especially in customer advocacy, because of things that Kaleena and Nick and I were saying, that, yeah, it's spiky and there was some interest here and everyone, exec just wants to try it out and be, hey, it's trendy. They read about it or they heard about it. That's sort of a tough spot to be when you have your job or your program is an experiment or like a POC, right? Like nobody wants that, but I think sometimes we might not realize we are in that, but sometimes your role may be experimental, right? But I think hopefully now that everything we talked about earlier about it, being the golden moment for customer marketing, that I think we're a little bit past that. I think people are starting to see that this role is not a nice to have, it's a must have. You want it to sort of be when you have a CMO that comes in and they're taking over, they're building a new team from scratch. You want it to be, they're going to bring their demand person, their marketing ops person, the product marketer. They're going to bring in all the functions that you expect to be there, and they're going to bring in their customer marketer. So you want to be in a place where the executive doesn't just sort of have a loose understanding. He or she actually feels and is passionate about why they brought you in there, what you're there to do, and that they have things in mind that they want you to do already on day one, which I think is an exciting thing for customer marketing to think like, wow, my executive, my CEO wants me in this role to already start doing things on day two. And maybe that's a little scary because you have to deliver on day two, but I think it's also exciting that the role has definitely sort of moved up out of the shadows. It's moved into the full visibility and spotlight of where the execs are looking. And I think a way to do that, again, as we talked about earlier, is knowing the things they care about. Your executive or your leader might really care about something like getting a Gartner Peer Insights customer choice. Or another one might say, that's not important to me at all, right? So for the same amount of effort, you could either get a huge win for the customer marketing program, or you could get sort of a good job, sort of, kind of pat on the back. So it's very much about knowing if you have a set amount of hours in a day, a set amount of that you could spend on something. I think it's really important just to have that visibility, that your executive, that they have your back, they know what you're working on. It aligns very closely with the strategic goals. And I always have Jeff in the back of my head to align to that. And I think it's so true. We've all seen that. And I think just start with those things that align to those, and maybe push off to a little bit later something that's going to be a ton of effort but doesn't align as closely. You might have to get to it, yes, but maybe figure out how you're going to balance that. And just in the spirit of time, I'm actually going to move us to the next slide here, talking about personal brand, right? Like it seems cliched and, oh, you need to build your personal brand, but why does that actually matter, especially now for a customer marketer? Why do you think that's so much more important now than ever? Because we are maybe in that spotlight. Nick, I don't know if you could maybe start us up. Why do you think this is just so important these days, maybe now more than ever?
Yeah. So it's always important. I kind of think. I mean, you take your reputation within your career in whatever position you're in, at whatever company you're in. That's what precedes you when you go elsewhere. So my philosophy is do the best job you can do. You want to always be trying to build, provide good work and accomplish the kinds of goals that you were hired to accomplish, because you take that with you. So that's one aspect of your personal brand. I would say almost that's the table stakes. Like that's what you should be doing. But beyond that, I think given that customer marketing is a fairly newer discipline within marketing departments, especially in the last several years, and then now in a time with a pandemic, a lot of companies are doubling down on wanting to retain the customers that they have. So if you are in a customer marketing role today, I would say now more than ever is a time to build your personal brand and essentially showcase that you have experience and you are a pioneer in this realm, because already compared to another year or two out where more and more companies are having these kinds of roles, you are going to stand out as someone who was in this earlier on and really took full advantage of doing what you could to learn everything you could and put yourself out there as this kind of a marketer. So I think it's really important to definitely get wrap your head around how you want to position and package who you are as a customer marketer and what you're like, kind of what you're good at, where you like to be. What, Kalina, you've talked about this, you know, what are your strengths, where you're kind of passionate about. Figure all of that out and start to document it on LinkedIn or wherever you're you know, presenting who you are, and start to get that out there. And then, you know, a few years down the road, you're going to be leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else who's just getting into it.
And I think that's so important, especially, and I think Nick talked about the external sort of building your brand. I think that's especially more important, but that might even be a little easier sometimes than doing that internally, right? So I think it's sometimes if you, Kaleena talked about being an introvert, it's sometimes we have to make noise for, not necessarily for yourself, but for your program, for the team that you're building, for the role of the customer marketer, the customer advocacy pro. Because if you don't, you know, Kaleena would say, hey, when a reference comes in, you know, you're not going to get the credit. No one's going to mention that. That's fine. So I think it's very much around sharing internally, whether that's, you might even have, what I've seen helpful is when you can is find when the sales team, if they have a quarterly get together or a weekly get together or a town hall, whatever you want to call it, see if you can get a slide or two in there on your program. Even if you can speak to it, great. If not, then have that in there. I would just say, make sure that what you're doing, your brand, your program's brand, is mentioned, is there, is part of when decisions are being made, is just part of the mix, especially for the team that you're supporting, whether it's sales, customer success. Make sure you might have a slide on their meetings, and I think that will go a long way toward that personal brand, toward the brand of the program that you're trying to build. All right, so I'm going to go to the next slide, just keeping track of time here. So, Kaleena, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, you know, we've all sort of, you know, talked about, you know, the roles. There's director, senior director, but is there a ceiling sort of a customer marketer? Like, is there no way to sort of get to more above and above and above? What will that look like, Kaleena? I wonder if you talk about, like, you had some interesting points, and we're talking about this earlier. What's your lens on this? You think about sort of the chief customer marketing officer. How are we thinking about that?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And I actually, you know, think about this a lot because there's so many different directions. If you think about it, I'm on the advisory board for this company by the name of CrowdAdvocate. And they spend a lot of time really doing analysis on who should we be. You know, should you be the CMO? Should you be a consultant? Should you create your own company? You know, or, you know, is that even what you want? And I struggle with this sometimes too, because being the CMO, you know, that's an involvement with brand and, you know, pipeline. You know, you have to like pipeline if you want to be the CMO. And I think you have to get your mind wrapped around that. And you have to ask yourself, do you want to be the CCO? Do you want to be the CMO? Or are you now they're creating all these different roles. I know when I was at Anaplan, we had a big planning layout and they created a chief planning officer. You know, we never heard of that, but now it's a big thing. But this goes back to my point of, you know, you have to ask yourself, who do you want to be long term? I know that there's many people out there like Liz Richardson. She was the vice president of customer advocacy for years at Influitive, and she broke out and actually created her own company that's strictly around advocacy. You have CrowdAdvocate that's strictly around building a platform that is going to make our customer marketing people successful and be able to track their numbers, which is similar to what Marketo did with marketing. You know, originally marketing didn't have a seat at the table until Marketo came along to track their pipeline and what they were bringing in. But, you know, I go back to say, do you want to be the CMO? You know, because if that's the case, you can build that case. Do you want to be the chief customer officer? You could do that. But some people that are in customer marketing, you don't actually want to do that. You know, a lot of the times I think about myself, my main brand is around women empowerment. It's around customer centricity. It's around, you know, diversity and inclusion. You know, I don't dream of being the CMO. I dream of being my own CEO. and really pulling in all those aspects that I'm passionate about. So I think that in the times that we're living in, you can get whatever you want, but you have to ask yourself, will the CMO role make you happy, or will you have to create your own role? And this is a big question because customer marketing wasn't a role a few years ago, but we've created it. At some point, a few years ago, you couldn't get beyond a senior customer marketing manager role. Now you have heads and VPs and I would say VP of customer experience. That's another big one too. So you have to ask yourself, what do you actually want? And actually sketch out that scope and figure out who your advocates are that's going to make you that successful. You can't get into the C-suite without an advocate that's going to vouch for you. You can be the smartest person in the room, but if you don't have advocates, how do you get there?
I agree, and I think it's so true. So for me personally, this job is all about relationships. That's my favorite part. And so if I can continue to see a path upward that allows me to focus on those relationship building and nurturing those, developing those, and having them last even across jobs, that's a place I would like to be, and I think that's possible. So I think it's the balance of staying true to yourself or seeing, can you get to where you want with keeping that core that you're really most focused on. So I am very cognizant of, we are at 1 minute left here. We probably could have taken this whole 2 hours, Jeff and Dana, but we will not. I know there's another speaker after us. We were going to pause for questions, but I think that's going to be not going to happen right here today, but we want to continue the conversation actually. So myself and a few others, we run a podcast called Advocacy Matters. So I would love folks on this line, Nick, Kalina, everyone who's on, if you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, please let us know. Please reach out to me. We'd love to do that. We can do them virtually, as well as we run an advocacy practitioner group, customer marketing, customer advocacy, that was started in Boston, yes, but with the pandemic, it actually gave us the silver lining to start go virtual, and we've been getting folks from Europe. We had folks from California join. We'd love to have the conversation continue there. And I know Kalina also has another way to stay engaged.
Oh yeah, so as you guys know, I do a lot of consulting and trying to make sure people get the jobs that they're looking for. So I will be hosting a segment on how to build your resume, how to build your LinkedIn to make sure that you're attractive for that specific role. And also we have a lot of different roles coming up for 2021 that I could provide introductions to. So feel free, there's a registration code that's located here. And also let me drop that in the Slack channel. There's gonna be a promo going on just from attending ConX. So feel free, register for that. I'm happy to try to get everyone the jobs that they're looking for next year and make sure 2021 is off to a good track for you. And yeah, just ping me.
So thank you so much, guys. So let's all stay in touch. I know there's a Slack channel, definitely LinkedIn, whatever here. So for us, this was nothing but fun. Hopefully you guys got something out of it. I know Kalina, Nick, and I did, even just from the prep. So this was such a great opportunity, and Dana, Jeff, thank you so much for connecting us all, for giving us this opportunity, and we're just excited for the other sessions and just to keep this going. So thank you guys so much.